The salty breeze of Marseille's viewport swept through the narrow streets, carrying the scent of fresh bouillabaisse and the chatter of fishermen unloading their morning catch. I was 25, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a restless heart, when I first arrived in this vibrant city. My name is Julian, born in a quiet village in Provence, where dreams were as small as the olive groves that surrounded it. But I had always yearned for something bigger, a life of discovery, of machines that roared to life under my touch, and of stories that unfolded beyond the horizon. Marseille, with its chaotic beauty and ancient soul, called to me like a siren. I had come to the city as an apprentice, sent by my vocational school to work under the tutelage of a grizzled mechanic named Claude. His garage, a cluttered haven of wrenches and oil cans, sat tucked in a corner of Le Panier, Marseille's oldest neighborhood. It was there, amidst the clatter of tools and the hum of engines, that I met Antoine and Leo, two boys my age who became my closest friends. They were as different as the Mediterranean and the mountains. Antoine, with his quick wit and endless stories of sailing with his mother, Isabelle, and Leo, reserved but fiercely loyal, always speaking of his mother, Marie, with a quiet reverence. The three of us spent long evenings after work exploring the city, sharing cheap wine and dreams of adventure. The journey to Marseille hadn't been easy. The train from my village had rattled through stormy nights, the tracks winding along cliffs that seemed to dare the sea below. When I arrived, the city overwhelmed its labyrinthine alleys, the cacophony of languages, the vibrant murals splashed across weathered walls. I was an outsider, a country boy in a place that pulsed with life. The first weeks were a blur of learning: how to navigate the steep streets of Le Panier, how to barter for fresh figs at the market, how to keep up with Claude's gruff instructions. But it was the people who left the deepest impression: their warmth, their resilience, their stories etched into every cobblestone. It was through Antoine and Leo that I met Isabelle and Marie. Isabelle was a force of nature, a woman in her late 40s with wild auburn hair and a laugh that could fill a room. She ran a small cafe near the port where she served espresso with a side of sharp banter. Marie, quieter but no less captivating, was a seamstress who worked from a tiny atelier filled with bolts of colorful fabric. Both women carried the weight of lives fully lived, widowed young, raising their sons alone and carving out spaces of joy in a city that demanded strength. I was drawn to them, not just as the mothers of my friends, but as women who seemed to embody Marseille itself, fierce, weathered, and beautiful. My integration into their world began slowly. Antoine invited me to his mother's cafe one evening, where Isabelle roped me into helping her fix a temperamental espresso machine. My hands, used to engines, found the task simple, and her gratitude was a warm meal and a glass of pastis. Marie, on the other hand, was harder to know. I met her when Leo asked me to deliver a repaired sewing machine to her atelier. She thanked me with a shy smile, her hands brushing mine as she took the machine, and I felt a spark I couldn't explain. Over time, I became a regular in their lives, fixing things, sharing meals, listening to their stories of Marseille's past, from its days as a trading hub to its struggles during the war. The more I learned about Isabelle and Marie, the more I admired them. Isabelle spoke of her youth sailing the Mediterranean, her dreams of seeing the world cut short by motherhood and loss. Marie shared tales of her Corsican ancestors, their traditions woven into the patterns she stitched. I began to see Marseille through their Isis city of survivors, of people who rebuilt after every storm. I joined them in small ways, helping Isabelle serve customers during the lunch rush, assisting Marie with heavy bolts of fabric. I learned snippets of the Provençal dialect, laughed at their teasing, and felt for the first time like I belonged. But belonging came with complications. My friendship with Antoine and Leo deepened, but so did my feelings for their mothers. It started innocently, a lingering glance from Isabelle as she poured me coffee, a quiet moment with Marie as we sat on her atelier's balcony, watching the sunset over the port. I was young, inexperienced, but I felt a pull toward both women, not just as individuals, but as two halves of a life I wanted to be part of. Marseille, with its open-hearted chaos, seemed to allow for such possibilities. When I confessed my feelings first to Isabel, then to Marie, I expected rejection. Instead, they laughed, not at me, but at the absurdity of it all, and then they talked. To my shock, they proposed something unthinkable in my village, a life together, the three of us. The relationship that followed was a delicate dance. Antoine and Leo, at first stunned, came to accept it, seeing the happiness it brought their mothers. Marseille's diverse tapestry, its mix of cultures, its history of defying norms made our unconventional bond feel less strange. We faced whispers and raised eyebrows, but Isabel's fierce defiance and Marie's quiet strength shielded us. I moved into a small apartment above Isabel's cafe, where the three of us built a life. We cooked together, laughed together, and faced the challenges of a city that was both home and crucible. I began to see myself not just as a mechanic, but as a partner, a bridge between two remarkable women and the community they loved. As our bond grew, so did my understanding of Marseille's struggles. The city was vibrant, but scarred poverty lingered in the shadows of its beauty, and many residents, like Isabel and Marie, worked tirelessly to keep their businesses afloat. I saw children who lacked access to education, families struggling to afford health care. My skills as a mechanic felt small in the face of such needs, but I wanted to contribute. I started teaching basic repair skills to local youths, setting up a workshop in Claude's garage. Isabel and Marie joined me, offering their own expertise. Isabel taught cooking classes. Marie led sewing workshops. Together, we created a small community hub, a place where people could learn, share, and grow. The turning point came when Isabel and Marie both discovered they were pregnant. At 48 and 47, they called it a miracle, laughing through their disbelief. I was overwhelmed by joy, by fear, by the weight of what our unconventional family would become. The pregnancies brought us closer, but they also brought challenges. Marseille's healthcare system was strained, and prenatal care was expensive. We faced judgment from some who saw our relationship as scandalous, but the community we had built rallied around us. Antoine and Leo, now proud brothers-to-be, helped paint a nursery in our apartment. Neighbors brought gift hand-stitched blankets from Marie's clients, homemade meals from Isabel's regulars. Our lives became a testament to Marseille's spirit, diverse, resilient, and fiercely loving. The workshop grew, attracting more students, and we secured a small grant to expand it into a proper vocational center. I taught engine repair, but more than that, I taught hope, the belief that skills could open doors. Isabel's cafe became a gathering place for discussions about the city's future, while Marie's atelier turned into a cooperative where women shared stories and stitched dreams. Our family, unconventional as it was, became a symbol of what Marseille could be, a place where love and community transcended norms. As the pregnancies progressed, we prepared for the future. The nursery was ready, filled with the colors of Marseille ochre, azure, and terracotta. We spent evenings on the balcony, planning names, sharing fears, and dreaming of the children who would inherit this vibrant, chaotic city. I realized I had changed not just from a village boy to a city man, but into someone who understood the power of connection. Marseille had shaped me, and I, in turn, had left my mark on it. The days grew shorter as autumn settled over Marseille, painting the city in hues of gold and crimson. The viewport, once a riot of summer activity, now hummed with a quieter rhythm, sailboats bobbing gently, vendors selling roasted chestnuts, and the distant cry of gulls echoing over the water. Our apartment above Isabel's cafe had become a sanctuary, its walls alive with the laughter of our unconventional family. Isabel and Marie, now 8 months pregnant, moved with a graceful heaviness, their hands often resting on their swollen bellies as they shared knowing smiles. I, Julian, felt a mix of awe and responsibility, my hands still calloused from wrenches, but now softer when I touched their faces or held their hands. Life in Marseille had a way of testing you, and our little family was no exception. The pregnancies, miraculous as they were, brought new challenges. Isabel, always the fiercer of the two, refused to slow down, insisting on running her cafe even as her ankles swelled. Marie, more cautious, spent her days in the atelier, stitching tiny clothes for the babies but tiring easily. I split my time between the garage, the workshop, and home, try to be everything they need: a partner, a provider, a pillar. The city's healthcare system, stretched thin, meant long waits at clinics and hefty bills we could barely afford. Yet Marseille's spirit, its grit, its heart kept us going. Neighbors dropped off baskets of vegetables, and Claude, my old mentor, slipped us extra cash from his garage's earnings, grumbling that it was just business, but winking as he walked away. Our community hub, born from my repair classes and Isabel and Marie's workshops, had become a beacon in Le Panier. The vocational center, now officially named Latelier Duport, was a cramped but lively space where teenagers learned to fix bikes, women stitched vibrant quilts, and families gathered for free cooking lessons. It wasn't just about skills. It was about hope, about giving people a way to rise above the city's hardships. I saw it in the eyes of Kareem, a 16-year-old who'd been skipping school until he rebuilt his first engine, or in Sophie, a single mother who sold her first handmade dress at the market. Isabel's cafe, just across the street, became the heart of it, a place where ideas were shared over coffee, where plans for Marseille's future took shape. But our unconventional family drew attention, not all of it kind. Marseille was a melting pot, but even here, our relationship raised eyebrows. Some locals whispered about the young mechanic with 2 wives, their words laced with judgment. At the market, I overheard a vendor mutter about scandal as Isabel bartered for fish. Marie, more sensitive, sometimes came home with red-rimmed eyes after a client questioned her choices. Antoine and Leo, our staunchest allies, faced their own battles. Friends at the university teased them about their weird family. Yet, they stood by us, Antoine with his quick humor and Leo with his quiet strength, reminding us that love was worth fighting for. The tension came to a head one evening at the cafe. A group of older men, regulars who'd always been friendly, began debating loudly about tradition and what's natural. Isabel, never one to back down, confronted them, her voice sharp as she defended our life. I stood beside her, my heart pounding, ready to step in, but it was Marie who surprised us all. She walked in, her pregnant belly prominent, and spoke softly but firmly, recounting how love had carried her through loss and hardship. The room fell silent, and one by one, the men nodded, some even apologizing. That night, as we closed the cafe, Isabel pulled us into a fierce hug, whispering, "We're stronger than their words." The incident shifted something in me. I'd always been the quiet one, the mechanic who fixed things and stayed in the background. But seeing Isabel and Marie stand up for us, I realized I needed to do more, not just for our family, but for the community that had embraced us despite its doubts. I began advocating for Latelier Duport, seeking partnerships with local businesses to fund tools and materials. I met with city officials, my village boy nerves trembling as I pitched our vision. A Marseille where every kid had a skill, every family a chance. Slowly, we gained traction. Iona Bakery donated flour for cooking classes. A hardware store offered discounted tools. The atelier grew, and with it, our family's place in the city's heart. As the due dates approached, our apartment became a whirlwind of preparation. Isabel, ever practical, organized everything with military precision: diapers stacked neatly, cribs assembled, hospital bags packed. Marie, more sentimental, spent hours sewing baby blankets, each stitch a prayer for the future. I worked late into the night, fixing up an old van to make it easier to get to the hospital when the time came. Antoine and Leo helped, their banter filling the garage with warmth. "You're going to be a dad twice over," Antoine teased, tossing me a wrench. "Better practice your lullabies." Leo, quieter, just smiled and clapped my shoulder, his way of saying he trusted me. The babies came on a stormy November night, the kind of night where Marseille seemed to hold its breath. Isabel went into labor first, her contractions starting just as she was closing the cafe. Marie, only hours behind, clutched my hand as we rushed to the hospital, the van rattling through rain-slicked streets. The delivery room was chaos, nurses barking orders, Isabel cursing through her pain, Marie breathing steadily but gripping my arm. I moved between them, holding their hands, whispering encouragement, my heart swelling with love and terror. When the first cries echoed Isabel's daughter, Amelie, followed by Marie's son, Theo, felt the world shift. They were tiny, perfect, their eyes blinking up at us as if they already knew the story of the city that awaited them. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and boundless joy. Our apartment, once quiet, was now alive with the sounds of baby Samley's soft coos, Theo's insistent wails. Isabel and Marie, despite their exhaustion, glowed with a new kind of strength. I learned to change diapers with clumsy hands, to soothe cries in the middle of the night, to love in ways I hadn't known were possible. The community rallied around us, bringing meals, offering to babysit, even decorating the cafe with tiny paper boats to celebrate the new arrivals. Antoine and Leo, now proud big brothers, took turns pushing the strollers through Lou Pannier, showing off their siblings to anyone who'd listen. Lately, Duport became a haven for our growing family. I'd bring Amelie and Theo to the workshop, their carriers tucked beside my workbench as I taught classes. The teenagers adored them, sneaking glances at the babies between lessons. Kareem, the boy who'd rebuilt his first engine, made a tiny wooden car for Theo, his shy grin breaking through as he handed it over. Sophie, now selling her dresses at markets across Marseille, gifted Amelie a miniature sundress, its fabric bright with Provençal patterns. The atelier wasn't just a place of learning anymore. It was a family, one that grew alongside ours. Our story began to spread beyond Le Pannier. A local journalist, intrigued by our unconventional family and the atelier's success, wrote an article that was picked up by a regional paper. Soon, photographers were snapping pictures of us, me, grease-stained and smiling, with Isabel and Marie, their arms around me, the babies nestled close. The headline read, "The Heartbeat of Marseille, a family redefining love and community." It wasn't just about us. It was about the city, about how a place of grit and beauty could embrace the unexpected. The article inspired Others, documentary crew reached out, wanted to film our work at the atelier, and a publisher contacted me about writing a memoir. Through it all, Marseille remained our anchor. The city's chaos, its colors, its contradictions, they were part of us now. We'd walk to the port on Sundays, Amelie and Theo in their strollers, the sea sparkling under the sun. Isabel would point out the boats, telling stories of her sailing days, while Marie hummed Corsican lullabies, her voice blending with the waves. I'd watch them, my heart full, knowing I'd found my place not just in Marseille, but in the space between these two women and their children, our children. The atelier continued to grow, its impact rippling through the city. We started a scholarship fund for young apprentices, named after Claude, who'd retired but still dropped by to grumble and offer advice. Isabel's cafe became a hub for community organizing, hosting meetings about affordable housing and better schools. Marie's Atelier cooperative expanded, empowering women to start their own businesses. Our family, once an oddity, became a symbol of Marseille's resiliency, a reminder that love, in all its forms, could build something lasting. As I stood on our balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the port in shades of fire, I thought about the boy I'd been, the one who'd arrived in Marseille with nothing but a toolbox and a dream. I was still a mechanic, still Julian, but I was also more a partner, a father, a builder of community. Isabel and Marie joined me, Amelie and Theo asleep in their arms, and we stood together, the heartbeat of Marseille pulsing through us. The future was uncertain, but it was ours, woven into the fabric of this city we called home. Winter draped Marseille in a soft chill, the viewport glittering under strings of holiday lights that swayed in the salty breeze. The city's pulse slowed, but never stopped. Fishermen still hauled their nets at dawn. Markets buzzed with vendors hawking clementines and mulled wine, and the narrow streets of Lupagne echoed with laughter and the clink of pastis glasses. Our apartment above Isabel's cafe was a warm cocoon, filled with the scent of Marie's lavender sachets and the soft gurgles of Amélie and Theo, now 3 months old. I, Julian, stood at the heart of it all, a mechanic turned family man, my life intertwined with Marseille's vibrant chaos and the 2 women who had redefined love for me. The early months of parenthood were a crucible. Amélie was a restless sleeper, her tiny fists flailing as if demanding the world's attention, while Theo, calmer but hungrier, kept us up with his midnight feeds. Isabel, ever the commander, tackled motherhood with the same fierce energy she brought to her cafe, organizing feeding schedules and singing Provençal lullabies with a voice that could soothe storms. Marie, quieter, poured her love into gentle touches, rocking the babies for hours as she whispered stories of her Corsican grandmother. I stumbled through all, learning to swaddle, to burp, to cherish the fleeting moments when both babies slept and we could collapse together, laughing at our exhaustion. Marseille, true to its nature, tested us beyond the nursery. Lately, Duport, our vocational center, was thriving but stretched thin. The grant we'd secured covered tools and rent, but demand outpaced supply. More kids wanted to learn. More women sought Marie's sewing cooperative. More families needed Isabel's cooking classes. We were running on fumes, fueled by coffee and conviction. The city's broader struggles loomed large. Unemployment crept up, and the port's fishing industry, a lifeline for many, faced competition from larger commercial fleets. I saw it in the faces of my student skids like Kareem, whose father had lost his boat, or Sophie, whose dress sales barely covered rent. Yet, Marseille's spirit was unbreakable, and our community reflected that. The atelier became a rallying point, not just for skills, but for solidarity. When a storm damaged the local market, we organized a repair crew, my students fixing stalls while Isabel fed the workers. When a neighbor fell ill, Marie's cooperative stitched masks and blankets, delivering them with quiet care. Antoine and Leo, now balancing university with their roles as big brothers, brought their friends to help, turning the atelier into a hub of young energy. The babies, Amélie and Theo, were mascots of sorts, their giggles drawing smiles from even the weariest visitors. Our unconventional family, once a source of whispers, had become a quiet legend in Lupagne. The documentary crew that had contacted us began filming, capturing the atelier's bustle, Isabel's fiery debates at the cafe, Marie's steady hands at her sewing machine. They interviewed me, too, and I fumbled through my words, trying to explain how a village boy had found home in this chaotic city, in the love of 2 women and the cries of 2 babies. The crew's director, a Parisian with a soft spot for underdog stories, said our tale was Marseille itself, gritty, messy, beautiful. I didn't know about that, but I knew it was ours. The documentary's attention brought new opportunities and new pressures. A national foundation offered funding to expand Latelier du Port, but they wanted us to formalize, to hire staff, to report metrics. Isabel, skeptical of bureaucracy, worried it would dilute our spirit. Marie, more pragmatic, saw the potential to reach more people. I mediated, my mechanic's mind breaking the problem into parts. We'd accept the funds, but stay true to our roots. We hired Kareem, now 18 and a skilled mechanic, as our first paid instructor, and Sophie joined to lead the sewing cooperative. The atelier grew, moving to a larger space near the port, its walls painted with murals by local kids. But growth wasn't without pain. The documentary aired on a regional channel, and while most feedback was warm, some viewers sent hateful letters, calling our family unnatural or worse. Antoine and Leo shielded us from the worst, deleting cruel comments online, but Marie took it hard, her confidence shaken. One night, as we sat on our balcony, Theo asleep in her arms, she admitted she feared for the babies, for the world they'd face. Isabel, fierce as ever, took her hand and said, "They'll face it with us, and that's enough." I added my hand to theirs, promising to protect our family, not just from words but from doubt. Marseille had taught me that love was a fight worth winning. The city's challenges didn't ease, but our impact deepened. Lately, Erdu Port launched a boat repair program, training fishermen to maintain their vessels and compete with the big fleets. I led the classes, my hands steady as I showed them how to patch hulls and tune engines. Isabel's Cafe became a co-op, with locals investing to keep it a community space. Marie's cooperative started exporting dresses to boutiques in Nice and Toulon, their vibrant patterns carrying Marseille's story afar. Our family's fingerprints were everywhere, not as saviors, but as neighbors, as builders of something lasting. Spring arrived, and with it, a milestone, Amélie and Theo's first birthday. We threw a party at the atelier, the new space bursting with color streamers, balloons, and a cake Isabel had baked with her signature chaos. The community turned out in force. Claude, grumbling but beaming. Kareem, now a mentor to younger kids. Sophie, glowing as her dresses sold out. Antoine and Leo led games, their laughter mingling with the baby's squeals. Isabel and Marie, radiant despite sleepless nights, danced with Amélie and Theo, their joy a defiance of every hardship. I watched, my heart full, knowing this was the life I'd dreamed, oft not perfect but real. The documentary, now streaming nationally, brought visitors to Marseille, journalists, activists, curious travelers. They wanted to see the atelier, to meet the family that had sparked a movement. We welcomed them, not as heroes, but as locals sharing coffee and stories. A publisher offered me a book deal, and though I hesitated, writing wasn't my trade, I agreed, with Isabel and Marie's encouragement. The book, The Heartbeat of Marseille, told our story but also the city's, its struggles, its triumphs, its people. It wasn't a bestseller, but it found its way into libraries, in hands that needed hope. As summer returned, we stood at a crossroads. The atelier was stable, with a staff of locals running its programs. Isabel's Cafe thrived as a co-op, and Marie's cooperative had a waiting list. Amélie and Theo, now toddling, chased each other through our apartment, their laughter a new rhythm in our lives. We could stay, keep building, or step back, trusting the community to carry on. Isabel, ever restless, dreamed of sailing again, maybe taking the babies on a small boat. Marie wanted to teach, to pass her Corsican traditions to the next generation. I, still a mechanic at heart, wanted to keep fixing things, engines, lives, futures. We chose to stay, but differently. I stepped back from running the atelier, focusing on teaching and writing, my books' royalties, funding scholarships. Isabel turned the cafe over to the co-op, staying on as a mentor. Marie expanded her cooperative, training women to lead. We bought a small house in Le Panier, its balcony overlooking the port, where we'd sit with Amélie and Theo, watching ships come and go. Antoine and Leo, now finishing university, talked of starting their own ventures, inspired by our work. Our family, once an oddity, was now woven into Marseille's fabric, our love a thread in its tapestry. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we gathered for a photograph, a moment the documentary crew had missed. It was just us, me, Isabel, Marie, Amélie, Theo, Antoine, and Leo, standing in the cobblestone street outside the atelier. The port sparkled behind us, its waters reflecting the city's endless life. Isabel and Marie, their bellies long since returned to normal, glowed with the strength of mothers. The babies, now children, clung to our legs, their eyes wide with wonder. Antoine and Leo grinned, their pride in us unspoken but clear. I stood between them all, my arms around Isabel and Marie, my heart a map of Marseille's streets. That photo, framed in our new home, became our legacy. It wasn't just a picture. It was a promise of love that defied norms, of a community that rose together, of a city that held us close. Marseille, with its grit and grace, had shaped us, and we, in turn, had shaped it. Our story lived on it in headlines, but in the kids who fixed their first engine, the women who sold their first dress, the families who found hope in a portside atelier. It lived in Amélie and Theo, who'd grow up knowing love has no limits. And it lived in us, a family forged in the heartbeat of Marseille, forever bound to its sea, its streets, and its soul.